All right, we are on to the next section, which is Chapter 2. Chapter 2 has conditional statements. Conditional statements always have two parts. They have a hypothesis and a conclusion. Another name for conditional statements are if-then statements. And another way we represent a hypothesis is by writing the letter P, and a conclusion is by writing the letter Q. So you'll often see these written as if P, then Q. This is how we're going to see them written. Another piece is to write the negation. And a negation means not, or the opposite of what you just wrote. So for instance, if I see the squiggle, that means not P, or the opposite of P, the hypothesis. Next is the converse. And the converse happens when I take the hypothesis and the conclusion and I switch places. So now the Q comes first and the P comes second. Then in the inverse, I'm going to take the opposite of P, then the opposite of Q, not P and not Q. And the last one is the contrapositive, which is flipping what we just did in the inverse, the not Q and the not P. The last statement that we have is called the biconditional statement, and that happens if and only if, meaning that both statements are true. The conditional and the converse are both true. Then we call it if and only if, and you'll see that the arrows this time are pointing in both directions, because either they could be flipped or this direction, and they're both true. Now for the last part of each of those statements, we're going to make truth tables. And the first one we're going to make is for the conditional statement. We're going to make a column for the P, and the P or the hypothesis will always read true, true, false, false. And the Q or the conclusion will always read true, false, true, false. That's how all the truth statements will start. And in a conditional statement, which again, the conditional statement is if P then Q, it would be written like this. These are the truth values. You can see that all of them are going to be true except for this one right here. And that happens because in an if-then statement, it's only going to be false when a true produces a false. So this situation right here. Otherwise, the rest of them are true. Now the next statement is a converse statement, and again, it's going to start the same. And the P is true, true, false, false. The Q is true, false, true, false. And again, remembering a converse is when the Q and the P are switched. The truth values for when the Q and the P are switched, or the converse statement, are this. And if Q then P is only going to be false when a false produces a true. So you can see this piece right here is the only time I'm going to see that false. Our next statement was the inverse statement. Again, the P and the Q are going to start exactly the same. But this time I'm going to need a column that says not P. And if you'll notice, the not P is from the first P column, but the opposite. So I'll try to cover this up. And that's why I wrote arrows for both of these. And you can see that they are just the opposite of the P column. Next, we will need a not Q column, which is why I starred those. You can see that this comes from the opposite of the Q column. So an inverse statement, remember an inverse is if not P, then not Q. Here are the truth values for an inverse statement. And you'll notice that they have the same truth values as a converse. And the last statement is a contrapositive, which again, the Q and the P are going to start exactly the same. I'm going to need a not Q which again is found from the opposite of the Q. I need a not P, which is found from the opposite of the P. And then a contrapositive, if you remember, is the opposite of Q, then the opposite of P. Here is the truth values for a contrapositive. And you'll notice that it's the same as a conditional statement. So you can see a contrapositive and a conditional statement pair together, and an inverse and a converse pair together.